Nurses, doctors, hospital workers of Reddit, what's your creepiest experience in a hospital? Serious. I used to work as an STNA in a nursing home, worked third shift throughout university. During the night we turned half the lights off so it was darker for the evening and didn't get a lot of light in the residents' rooms. We had one resident who was younger 70s and was mostly in for mental reasons. She had long, dark hair and was very thin. I was sitting at the nurse's station at the top of the hall and heard a call light go off. I stood up, looked down the dark hall, and on all fours, straight out of the ring, this resident was crawling up the hall toward me. The other STNA had forgotten to put the bed rail up and the resident was very good at climbing out of bed. Needless to say, I needed some new britches and my heart was racing a mile a minute. This is glorious. A genuinely creepy story that contains no blood and no paranormal. Well done. My mom used to work as a nurse in the cardiac ward of a major city hospital. She told me that if they couldn't seal an incision after open hair surgery, they'd have to be vigilant and bandage the wound while cleaning it constantly. She told me she'd have to clean wounds while watching the heartbeat within their body. She told me that one time she had to watch a doctor dig into a dude's chest cavity to remove an obstruction, all while the dude was conscious. I'm always amazed how brute force medicine can be. Patient comes up to the unit from the ED. ED nurse warns me this is a bad elder abuse case and the local PD is involved as well as adult protective services. She was found on a mattress covered in urine and stool. The poor woman was horribly demented and her arms and legs were contracted in the fetal position. Her eyes were bloodshot and she was covered in wounds and open sores. Even though she couldn't move, those bloodshot eyes would follow me while I was in her room. She kept trying to talk but her mouth was swollen and full of sores. She ended up dying shortly after we changed her code status. Her eyes were open and looking through the doorway when I walked in after the monitor showed asystole. I will never forget her face and those eyes will stay with me forever. Creepy as frick. A 9-year-old girl came in once. Her parents had been finding her dolls hanging around the house with belt or strings tied around their necks. She went into a rage and held a knife to her own throat. They brought her to the hospital and during her psych evaluation she said she heard voices in her head telling her she was stupid and telling her to kill herself. She said she didn't want to but she had to listen to the voices. I couldn't sleep for weeks. That's what schizophrenia can do to you. I worked in a nursing home as an RNA. While I worked there, 7 residents called me into their rooms to tell me thank you and goodbye on different nights over the 3 years I was there. All of them died during the night after they told me. They all knew. I don't know how, but there is no other way to explain it. 1 would be a coincidence, maybe even 2, but 7? Worked security through college at a local hospital. The only creepy thing I remember is when a dead man moaned. One of my duties was to help wheel patients who had expired down to the in-house morgue. Once we were wheeling an older man from the ER down and halfway down the hallway he let out this low moan. I started to panic thinking that he was coming back to life, but the RN explained to me, newbie, that sometimes the air in the lungs doesn't come out until sometime later or is delayed for a bit. I used to work in St. Bart's Hospital in London, which in parts is over 1,000 years old. One of the buildings had 2 floors, with massively high ceilings, and so the floors were taken out and rearranged to make into 5 floors. The nurses working night shift would often tell us of the ghost of a night nurse who wandered silently doing her rounds at night, but due to the new floors, only her head would be visible drifting down the ward. I've realized my new greatest fear, dying only to spend eternity haunting the place I work, doing my job. I got the opportunity to shadow nurses and surgeons for 2 of my class periods in high school. I never really experienced being in the ICU before. What was creepy for me was seeing how many unconscious people were fighting for their lives. I followed a nurse to a major heart attack patient. This guy was put under an induced coma but his eyes stayed open. The nurse had me help put gel over his eyes. It's been 3 years and I still have his dead gaze stuck in my head. I also had to help reposition the guy and it was like trying to move an extremely stiff mannequin. Seeing a human in a not so human state is extremely uncomfortable and creepy. The first time I seen a dead body that hadn't been done up in a funeral home, I was terrified. But there is a light behind our eyes. When we die it goes out. It's very unnerving. 4th year nursing student here. My story is more sad than creepy. I was sitting for a 28-year woman going through alcohol withdrawal. Day 3. The worst day. Sitting is when you sit at the patient bedside because the patient is a danger to themselves others. She was in full restraints, hands feet bound to the bed, so she couldn't physically hurt me, but she kept calling me an ugly niar and spitting all over the room. After a while, she started hallucinating. She thought she was in the car and I was sitting in the front seat, her 2 kids in the back. She talked about her kids for a while and then started screaming and telling me to take the wheel. This scene went on for about 10 minutes of her explaining in vivid detail the car crash that had happened and how she had killed her son. When the story was over, she kept crying and apologizing to me and asking me to pick up her son's dead body and give it to her. She was given IV sedatives, but when those wore off she had the same hallucination again. It replayed about 7-8 times over the duration of my 12-hour shift. It was extremely unsettling because after hearing the story a few times, I could tell that this was something that actually happened and that she was replaying the horrifying memory in her head over and over and over again in her delirious state. Poor woman must have suffered so much. I'm glad she finally checked into a rehab program to detox. But it's sad to think of the long journey she has in front of her, living with the fact that she killed her 7-year-old son. I'm sorry to know you went through that, but happy to know there are compassionate people like you in these situations. Bless you, and good luck. I'm a nurse in an emergency medical unit, and when somebody comes in under section awaiting a mental health bed, if they have acute psychosis 99% of the time they talk about Jesus, 666 and the devil as if they are actually possessed. Psychiatrist here. Once worked on a ward where we had a Jesus, a Mohammed, and a Moses at the same time. I work at a nursing home. I'm not actively involved in the direct care of the residents, but I still interact with them on a daily basis. There was one woman on my unit who had a son who visited her every day. She was on hospice, so he wanted to be around as much as possible for his mom. She passed away during one of the rare times he wasn't in the building. We called him to let him know, and he got in his car immediately to come be there when the funeral home came. The aides had finished preparing her body to be taken out, and we were all just waiting on the son to get there to call the funeral home. Her room was empty. The moment he rounded the corner to the hallway her room was in, her call light went on. The nurse on duty and I looked at it, then at each other, as if confirming that we both saw it. As soon as he went into the room, it went off again. That's the strangest experience I've had so far. This one actually kind of makes me happy because you hear so often about the elderly just being ditched to nursing homes by their butthole children who don't want anything to do with them anymore. This man who visited his mom every day is very touching. I worked for a rural hospital and we had a patient that came in with a heart attack. We worked on her fruitlessly for 30-40 minutes. The doctor declared her dead and invited the family in. Her body laid in front of the grieving family for almost another half hour. Her family members begged her to come back and say goodbye. She promptly obliged. She sat up, hugged one of them and said goodbye. The entire A staff rushed in and ran a full code for the second time. She was pulseless and cold when we started the first time, and worse when we ran the second. She never made it, but she was back to say goodbye. It was one of the most unsettling things I ever saw there. This happened with my cousin. She was in a coma or a coma-like state. I was young when it happened, and her older sister begged her to come back one last time before they pulled the plug on her. My cousin woke up from the coma, hugged her sister and slipped right back into her original state and passed away shortly after. It gives me chills every time I think about it. Used to work on the burn unit and got a call saying we had to do the burn wound treatment on a guy who just doused his girlfriend in gasoline and lit her on fire. Dude was like 6 feet 5 inches, 280 pounds and covered in tattoos and had 3 police guards to shackle him down flat to the bed while we helped heal someone that just basically murdered someone. The burn unit was very cool, but one of the hardest things in my life I've ever done. I was a hospital aide for a year working in a unit that saw its fair share of DNRs and death. One night my shift was almost over, and a patient in the next unit passed. That unit only had one aide, so I went over to help her. She'd been there for years, so we get to work without really talking, cleaning the body, removing tubes, changing soiled linens. When it came time to put the deceased into a body bag, She rolled the patient, a large man, towards me, with the intention of sliding the bag underneath his frame. However, she rolled him and a large groan escaped his lips, and we both jumped and nearly dropped him. It was just air or gas escaping his lungs, but it sounded exactly like a moan someone makes in their sleep. We double checked for a pulse, found none, and by now he was mottling on his underside, a color change when blood pools beneath the skin due to lack of flow from a heartbeat, and hadn't had vitals for a few hours, so we knew he was definitely dead. Still, it creeped me the frick out and gave me the heebie-jeebies. One of the aides I work with said she was doing post-mortem care on a patient who had been on many anticoagulants before death. She said when they turned her on her side she started bleeding out of every orifice: eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. She said her and the nurse went home and had nightmares for a week. I do hospital security. Creepy stuff would be when you find doors unlocked that you locked and such, or touring through abandoned areas and hearing things can be creepy. Most things out of the ordinary aren't creepy to me, more sad, tragic or morbid. I worked hospital security for a while too. There was one floor of the main bed towers that you could just feel something watching you and dread. During the night and day the same feeling. Later I found out that floor had the most people die in the entire hospital. I mean, I like to think I am a very logical person, but I could feel some sort of dark energy on that floor. I've got a few stories. While I was still a student nurse, I was working in a very old hospital. They were renovating one of the wards, so the staff were advised they can sleep on that ward in the completed rooms until it was opened up again. One night I was sleeping in one of the rooms with a fellow nurse when suddenly I hear a scream from the bathroom. I fly out of bed to find my co-nurse huddled in the corner farthest from the mirror. I crap you not. In the reflection of the mirror was a super faint, almost shadow-like figure in the mirror that faded like instantly. I knew it wasn't one of our shadows because there was a light directly above the sink and mirror. Freaking never slept in that ward ever again. While I was working night shift at a hospital one time, we had a patient that was living with dementia and had some serious expressions. We had her in a broader chair at the nursing station and she was talking with my co-workers and I. We had called one of the residents to the ward so we could get a sleeping pill for this woman, and he was in the middle of writing the order when the woman looks at us and says, "I really don't like this man." So my co-worker asked, "Oh, why not?" She responded with, "I don't know. He just gives me the weird vibes. You know what I should do? I should die on him." She then lays back in the freaking chair, closes her eyes and freaking dies. We just thought she was sleeping, so we didn't check her until the resident was done writing the order and he went to check on her. Said she was dead and kinda laughed, stating, "Frick. I guess she showed me." I've got more but I have to run. I'll update when I get back. Dying on people is now my new go-to strategy for showing them. This was from when I was a CNA in a nursing home subacute rehab. My first severe paranoid schizophrenic patient. He was actually only in for rehab after a hip replacement. He was very well behaved and actually mild mannered, but his eyes had nothing behind them. He was very independent, but needed some help with dressing. He had a huge flag in his care plan advising to make direct eye contact with him as much as possible during direct care. He had only mild auditory hallucination, but his paranoia was off the charts, and if he noticed you looking at someone anywhere else in the room he would fall into a panic. This entailed a lot of screaming and trying to hide from us. It was very disturbing to see, and honestly heartbreaking. He was horrified of what he thought we would do to him, or about who else was there. I guess it wasn't any one situation with him, but his demeanor, the staring, the monotone voice, even if he wasn't in a panic, which only happened 2-3 times over his 6 weeks, everything about it was unnerving. I work as an ICU nurse. A mid-20s female came in with some serious cardiac abnormalities and then went into respiratory distress. Never had any medical history at all. We had to put her on the ventilator, but she was on just enough sedation to keep her lucid. She could not shake her head yes and no appropriately to questions. One night, the patient in the room next to hers died, but the body was still in the room about to be taken to the morgue. The female patient's door was closed with curtains drawn, so she couldn't have seen what was going on next door. When I went in to check on her, she had a look of sheer panic on her face. Trembling, I asked her a series of questions to see if she was cold, hot, in pain, etc. and she denied all. I asked her if she saw something. She started to aggressively nod her head yes. She wasn't on any drugs that would make her hallucinate. I went on to get details on what this thing looked like. After playing 20 questions I got this. A man, pale white, left arm missing, heavy, bald, standing still, behind me. This was the man who had just died next door. I spent the rest of the night consoling her. I work and dispatch in the basement of the hospital. I was working the night shift and I was alone. I had the door closed, and there is a key code needed to unlock the door. I am the only one in my corridor of the basement at this time. I heard over the intercom that there was a code yellow, missing patient, from the mental health floor. I have no idea how he got out, but now he was roaming the hospital. About 10 minutes later, the door handle starts shaking and someone is trying to get in. I stayed completely silent until it stopped, then got up and looked through the peephole. There was a man just sitting against the wall wearing a hospital gown. I went back to my desk and called security, and I spoke as quietly as I could so he wouldn't hear and run away. Security came and I heard them take him away. He was yelling all sorts of stuff that didn't make sense and was clearly resisting them. A guard came in afterwards and asked if I was okay and I told him I was fine thanks to the door lock. Thank you, keypad. I work at an architecture firm and we had a lunch and learned today about electronic access controls. Your story would have been fun to share had I read it before lunch. Context: lack of room in the hospital. Some rooms sadly must have 2 patients. Frontal syndrome patient, due to metastasis of lung cancer. Laugh while we announce the high probability of lung cancer to his hospital roommate. For your information, frontal syndrome is in reference to your frontal lobe. It will seriously frick up nearly everything about it. Inappropriate emotional reactions is one of many symptoms. My mom works as a nurse in the ICU and she always says that the patients know when it is their time. They usually say nandito na sila or they are already here in Filipino. They also usually ask for a glass of water and just flatline right before it was given to them. Most patients, days before they die, say that they can see a black figure in the corner of their room. Scary crap. My mom usually experiences not less than 2 deaths a week, whether her patient or not. I can't imagine the stress she goes through, and I admire her strength for that. When my dad was actively dying he would talk about seeing loved ones in front of him. I had to sleep in the same room with him at night for a couple of weeks BC. My mom had to go on a trip. I barely slept a wink those couple of weeks. I kept thinking was the Grim Reaper in the shadows alongside dead loved ones. On my way to the morgue with a colleague, pushing a bed with a recently deceased man. My first time going down there, so I was a little bit creeped out, but it was with a kind of cute colleague, so I kept my cool. We leave the body in the cold storage room. She goes out while I handle the paperwork and I shortly follow and reach to close the door behind me. After that follows one of the most terrifying screeches I have ever heard from the room behind me. I lose my crap, jump about 2 meters in the air and let out a loud screech. Turns out the door screeches when closing, but not when opening. My colleague was laughing her butt off. You have been visited by the science doggo. Upvote now and you will get high grades and good results within the next week. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.